Welcome back to another video on the VOR pathways. If you've watched the other five, thank you for your attention. Please let me know if you have any comments or suggestions on ways that we can make the video better. So for our last VOR video, we need to discuss what happens when we roll our head to the left. So when we roll our head to the left, we know that our left anterior and left posterior canals are being stimulated by that movement. And we know that we need to perform a dextrocycloversion of our eyes to compensate for this head roll. And so this is going to be a movement of the upper poles of our eyes to the right to compensate for it. So head rolls to the left, eyes shift to the right in order to compensate for it and to keep our eyes on target, which is the purpose of the VOR. So today what we're going to be doing is going through the pathways again. Just like with the right head roll or the right roll VOR pathways, I'll just show the excitatory pathways for this video. If you're interested in the inhibitory pathways, please let me know and I can create a separate video for those. So let's go ahead and get started. So I try to keep things the same as we've already sort of discussed. And the first thing that I want to do is figure out if I'm rolling my head to my left, then which canals are being stimulated. And as we've talked about before, a left roll, a left head roll is going to stimulate both the left anterior and the left posterior canals. The right canals, the right anterior and posterior canals are in fact inhibited by this movement. I'm going to show you the excitatory pathways for both, but think of it like this. For the chin up or chin down or the pitch maneuvers, either up or down, then you already know which pathways result in that, which pathways are required to make our eyes move appropriately. Because this is just stimulating one side, in this case, the left side by a head roll, the right canals are being inhibited, and therefore we don't have that symmetry of pathways like we saw with upward chin rotation or downward chin rotation. In fact, it's just going to be the pathways from one side. So let's get started here. And step one, like I mentioned before, is to know which canals are being stimulated. So we've already said left anterior, left posterior canals. But the next thing to know is what is happening with the eyes. So which muscles are in fact going to be stimulated? Well, if I'm rotating my head to my left, then my left eye has to encyclotort and my right eye has to excyclotort. So your encyclotors for your left eye are going to be your superior oblique and your superior rectus. Left eye is encyclotorting, the right eye is excyclotorting. So what muscles, try to recall what muscles are resulting in excyclotortion for your right eye. And in fact, those are the inferior oblique mostly, and the inferior rectus is contributing a small amount to that as well. So these are the muscles that are eventually going to be stimulated by the left anterior and posterior canals. But let's find out, we'll start with the left anterior canal, just like we did with the right side in the last video. But let's start off by looking at what does the left anterior canal connect to. So it starts off in the left anterior canal, and it's going to come over here, and it's going to synapse in the vestibular nucleus. And then specifically, the superior portion of the vestibular nucleus. The next thing that's going to do, or the next part of the chain, is to send a neuron out. And as you know, this signal is going to decussate and cross over, and it's going to send on up to the cranial nerve 3 nucleus, or the oculomotor nucleus on the contralateral side. The decussation point right here where it crosses over is the brachium conjunctivum. As we've already noted whenever we were looking at the anterior canal for our downward chin acceleration video. So it crosses over at the brachium conjunctivum and then ascends up the brainstem until it gets to the midbrain, where it synapses in the oculomotor nucleus. So this signal, as you know, the superior rectus has to be stimulated in some way, shape, or form. The inferior rectus and inferior oblique have to be stimulated in some shape or form. For the anterior canal, it's responsible for stimulating the inferior oblique here, and that's going to stay ipsilateral. So those connections will stay on the same side as the cranial nerve nuclei that stimulated those muscles. As you remember, for the superior rectus, those connections are going to decussate. So the right superior rectus subnucleus, in fact, innervates the left superior rectus muscle. This actually happens within the brainstem, but for ease of demonstrating this in the video, I'm just going to have it cross over and then come up here and innervate this superior rectus here. And in fact, these are the pathways for the left anterior canal. They should look very familiar because they're exactly the same as what we looked at whenever we were talking about downward chin acceleration, except that this time the right anterior canal is being suppressed or inhibited by this left head roll. So now let's look at the posterior canals, specifically the posterior canal excitatory pathway on the left side, this canal right here. So this canal is going to send signals out to the vestibular nucleus. And then specifically, these are going to go to the medial vestibular nucleus. So let me put an M in here. Medial vestibular nucleus, and those connections are going to synapse. So the neuron is going to send out or come out from the posterior canal and synapse in the medial vestibular nucleus. So these connections are going to cross over or decussate, and they're in fact going to ascend via the MLF. But for ease of video, hopefully making this easier to understand, I'm actually going to keep these on the outside here so that it doesn't get too confusing with stuff running up through the MLF. So these, in fact, do ascend via the MLF. So I'll draw an arrow here because they are using the MLF to ascend up through the brainstem to the level of the midbrain. Now, the muscles that we still have to innervate are going to be the left eye superior oblique and the right eye's inferior rectus. And you can see that I already drew one pathway all the way up here to the oculomotor nucleus. This branch is also going to come off, or there's going to be a branch off of this nerve, and it's going to innervate the trochlear nucleus here. And so now you can, in fact, sort of fill in the gaps or finish up the rest of the neurology here. So the inferior rectus is going to be stimulated by its own ipsilateral oculomotor nucleus. So we'll draw those connections here. And the superior oblique is going to be stimulated by the contralateral trochlear nucleus. And so again, those connections are going to exit the brainstem dorsally, and they're going to decussate, and then they're going to wrap around the brainstem and proceed anteriorly towards the eye. And so I'll demonstrate this by just showing it crossing over. But remember, this doesn't go through the brainstem. It doesn't intermingle with the neurology within the brainstem or anything like that. It's in fact already myelinated. The fascicle has exited the brainstem, et cetera, et cetera. So now it's going to go forward and it's going to innervate the contralateral superior oblique. So, you know, again, what I like to do is think which canals are being stimulated and then which muscles are being innervated. And then from there, I can work backwards and figure out which cranial nerve nuclei are doing the stimulating. So again, this has been the VOR movement for a head roll to the left. When we roll our heads to the left, we perform a compensatory dextrocycloversion, where the upper poles of our eyes are rotating to the right. Thank you for watching. Please let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day.